That's a really good question. Okay, anyways.
God, I'm funny.
God, so fucking hilarious. Okay.
So good.
All right, welcome everybody to the MAE Podcast. It is me, Evan, and I am joined here with Max. And today we are going to be talking about this wondrous thing called writing. Right, Max?
Yeah, creative writing in general. I'm going to be focusing more on just, novel writing. There's a lot you could do with it. I mean, there's short stories, poetry, screenplays. Creative writing can apply to like a ton of that stuff, and not to mention just creative writing for stuff that is more visual, writing ideas for movies, animation, graphic novels. I have one experience with it, but kind of the ideas and that I've come up that I've wanted to talk about kind of can apply to a lot of those, and just kind of is more in the creative process in general. So, yeah.
I don't know if you guys can tell, but Max is obviously the expert on this topic for this week. I have not done writing in forever. Max, when is the most recent book that not the book that you've been working on? How long ago did you continue to work on that?
Funny enough, before I say that, I want to say the first stuff I had done, because we were talking about this a little bit before, and I don't know if you remember this, Evan, was in like elementary school when I wrote Halo fan fiction with you and me as the characters.
I remember that. Oh my
and a few of our other friends. I found that the other day. I need to see if I can find it sometime and like read over it some, because
you did not.
Oh my gosh. Of course, for those who don't know, we went to elementary school together, and when we were there, him and I were both really into Halo, specifically Halo Reach.
Oh, yeah.
So because of that, with the whole Noble Team thing, we wanted to do that, but with us and our friends. So I at least wrote a whole like story with all these different Spartans that were all of our different friends and that, and we had all these different missions and stuff, and it was
Dude,
and I did the same thing with Call of Duty Zombies.
Yeah, you did the Call of Duty Zombies. I fucking remember that. Whoa. I gotta beg the question now. What kind of Spartans were we? Were we Spartan 2s or 3s? 4s?
Some of Noble Team.
They were
not all
two.
Noble Team. Yeah, not all.
They were all 3s. I think
wasn't George
was
a
2? George was a 2, and then I think maybe 6 was a 2, but George was most 100% a 2.
Yeah, I think 6 was a 2 as well. Yeah, I think.
But I know that 6 was hyper lethal as well. Well, no, we'll talk about Halo some other time.
Yeah, some other time. I do not, and when I made that, do not remember what the Spartans were. I'll be honest, I don't think I knew what that was at the time. I just thought, ooh, Halo, fun game.
Wow, the Halo guys, wow.
Whoa.
I got the armor, whoa. Dude, I remember back in elementary school, I wrote about a piece of bread that was a superhero, and to activate his superpowers, he had to go into a toaster.
I didn't know about this.
It's because I wrote like half a page of it, and I'm like, what am I thinking? This is a dumb idea.
How old were you?
This is in like 3rd grade.
So in 3rd grade, you were realizing like, oh, this is dumb.
Yeah.
Because usually by then,
you
you don't have that like sense of humility, so you're like, I'll just make whatever. Because I made those stories about like the video games. It was in like middle school in like 6th grade.
I think it was just my ADHD was just like, no, we're done doing this. Let's do something else. And I was like, okay, let's go do what were those times tests? Let's go do that.
Just got bored of it. Yeah. Put our mind somewhere else. But to get back on track then with your original question, so I have been working on one main story. Honestly, for a while, it's been because I've kind of jumped back and forth on working on it and not working on it, just depending on stuff. We're both in school, about done, at least for me. But because of that, we kind of made it hard to always be consistent with working on it because, just things come up, you're doing other stuff in college and that it can be kind of difficult. And not to mention if working can make it a little challenging as well. So I've been back and forth on it, but I have been working on it for quite a while. The story is a horror story, which is actually funny enough, a lot of the ideas I have. And I think it honestly stems from my fascination with horror and a lot of younger watching videos of people playing horror games, Markiplier and PewDiePie. A lot of that stuff kind of gave me ideas for that. But yeah, I'll probably give I don't want to just go into my work right now, so I'll maybe I'll talk about it a little bit later, but more so talk about just in general. But this horror story I've been working on for a while, I have like a couple tens thousands of words or something on it. But wow. Funny enough, I know like so much of it is going to be cut down and changed because that's like the process with it.
Yeah. So what got you started with creative writing?
So when I first got into it, I was like in probably freshman year of college. I remember talking to my friend Michael, who I mentioned before. He's my roommate. We've known each other for years. Evan knows him as well. We all grew up together. But I remember talking to him while we were in college, and I had these ideas that came into my mind about different stories. I think my first idea was, and I think I remember it pretty well because I based it more in my real life, even though in this case, I do have a good relationship with my dad. It's not the same. But the idea was that two friends come home from college, and his dad, who he thought had died or just left him at a young age, he learns that his dad left a bunch of these tapes for him that were kind of leading him to find him. So over the course of this summer break, him and his friend go like across the country searching for him and meet all these different people that knew his father and learns about his life because he never knew anything about his father. So that was the initial idea I had, which I don't know where that came from. Like I said, I'm fine with my dad. We're fine. There's no issue there. But the idea just came into my mind, and I was just like, and I told my friend, I was like, I have these ideas, and I feel like I have no way of expressing them creatively because I wasn't an artist. I really couldn't draw. I was never really that good at it. Don't have the money for like filmmaking or any of that, nor did I know much about it. So writing became for me a way of expressing these ideas. And so I started with that, and then it kind of expanded on from there as I came up with different ideas. Eventually, like a few years ago, I said I got a better idea about my this horror story I told you about. Funny enough, it was a short story idea to begin with, and then I wrote with it. And I'm like, I can make this into a novel. I can do more with this. So I kept expanding it outwards more and more. And now, funny enough, it's changed so drastically from what it once was. But that's a lot of the times how the creative process goes.
Yeah, I don't know much about the creative process because back in third grade, the creative process was just, it came as it was. And like the only thing I have that's kind of similar is just writing. I haven't even written a full publication, but writing things like that for science, and they're not really creative at all. I can't really be like, oh wow, well I had this in mind, because no one really cares what I have in mind. They care about like what's done. So like, how's the difference between that? Like, is there any like resources for like getting your ideas out there and then like checking them off with other people other than just like by word of mouth and with friends? Do you know of anything like that?
Yeah, and that's a great point about the whole difference, because in academically you're going to learn, doing either English essays, or you're going to be doing stuff with science and STEM. I'm in engineering, and engineering papers are not creative writing works. It's a very different style of writing, which can, it's good in its own way. But if you're wanting to write creatively, it is a kind of a different way you have to think about it. And for me, it kind of helped from just reading other works. That is always the best practice, like seeing how others write, how professionals, you look at George R.R. Martin or Tolkien, Harry Potter books, all that stuff. You can see how these people wrote. But one of the biggest resources for me about taking ideas and then structuring them into plots has been from, reading, but specifically from reading books about writing. So one of my favorites is this book right here, Save the Cat, Writes a Novel. This is actually as it says, it's based on another book, which is Save the Cat, about screenwriting, which is also very good if you're writing and if you're trying to write for actual movies. So both of these books, Save the Cat, Writes a Novel, and Save the Cat for Screenplay, both of them are great resources for learning this. But what this book taught me was taking ideas and concepts, either about a character, a theme, a setting, and being able to expand that into an actual story and a world more so. Some of these are just very small worlds, others are big, large worlds. Because one of the helpful things about this is that it shows you how to, establish characters and create setting and all that. Then it builds on that to get an idea of what is what section is your book in? Like, what is the, they give it like 8 different story structures to fit into, and kind of not the really check boxes you need to hit, but the general structure for successful stories in that. Because there's always a thing of, when you work with creative and artistic works, it's hard to really say you stick to a structure, but it is a point of a good book, a good movie, you most of the time has a structure that has created success in creating a good story. So the books like these just help give that idea. One of the things they talked about is, of course, making a story out of a concept you have. So a lot of my ideas I came up with were just, they can be inspired by whatever. A lot of the times it would be sometimes, I remember so the story, my horror story, Bingo, it came to me because I was listening to somebody talk a movie podcast, and they described I don't even remember what the movie was called, but it just had a goofy like children's show name, and the visuals looked like they were in a desert of some sort. And that immediately gave to me, because basically mine is a post-apocalyptic world with this strange kids TV show that seems like it's almost like supernatural in some way. That kind of just built from this initial idea. And then so it started off with just thinking, oh, I want to create a just this horror story where it's post-apocalyptic world, they're in a desert looking around, find some crazy old guy and he's obsessed with this show. That was my initial idea, and that was initially what I was writing for. But then it started to expand on that, because I'd think about okay, what are these characters about? What are there going to be their changes? What is the theme? What am I trying to tell in this story? And what is the structure to create an interest of flow of, high action, high excitement to shorter, to more calm, not as intense points? Because, if you're always at 100%, it's a little too much. But if you're always nothing, then it's just boring. You just have an art piece, and that can be good in some ways. But like I said, if you're going by an actual story structure, and this way, honestly, can be applied to pretty much any kind of story. So that's why I say this is kind of like creative thinking in general for creating a story. But because of that, those are kind of the things I began to focus on. I looked at it, I'm like, okay, what do I want out of this main character? And then I thought, what do I want out of side characters? What are they doing? What role do they have? Then I thought, what is the main conflict? What is creating tension in this? What is creating a sense of doom and sense of worry, especially with a horror story? And then from there, I thought, what am I trying to tell with this? What message am I putting out there? What is this trying to teach people? And then so from that, it made me expand on it a little bit and think more about what was the point of the story? When I got this idea, what was I trying to express? And that kind of got me to be able to go deeper and deeper into those ideas and and then create a world and a story. And then, of course, just going by like, what's cool? There's always that as well. Just like what is interesting and cool. But those have been my main ways of building ideas.
So you start building ideas, like you said, off of a podcast. You kind of got your idea for a world from that, and then you've got like your characters that just kind of evolve from that world, and then also like plots that evolve from your characters, which also side plots that evolve from side characters. So like, do you think there's like a set method that works the best, or is it like if someone can come up with characters and then make a world from it, then that's good? If someone can take a world and make characters from it, then it's good?
It's more of what you just said there. It's about kind of just how you approach it. So in the case of the Bingo story, that was built on a setting and a general concept. That was what built the story. But then I had the idea of a more fantasy story, and that was built from a character dynamic. I wanted, and people who know this, basically visualize like the Frost Atronak from Skyrim. I had that visual of that as kind of a person, a character. And I wanted it to be, what if that was a human? Someone who once was a human, struggling with their humanity. And from there, I also wanted a character kind of being like a father-son relationship with that. And so I built these two main characters of this like, ice element was once human with a person who's struggling with, whatever they have in their life. I wasn't exactly sure at that time. And I wanted to put those together. And I knew that was going to be a fantasy story. So then the story and world built out from a character dynamic and just expanded outwards from there. And then same idea with another idea I had, which I wanted to be about, and these are all rough concepts because like I said, I don't have any books published, which I know. I wish I had. I'm trying to get these done and, finish them and be able to put them out there. It can be harder than you think to write, just to put words on a page. But another idea I had was built on the idea of kind of a more symbol of teaching and learning. And it was because I wanted to be about the importance of a teacher, of a teacherly role and what it means to teach, people, not just in a school setting of math, science, that, but in teaching somebody about improving and growing as a person. And so that built into a story about right now the ideas I have of like an ex-con wanting to teach at a school, going to teach at a school, an underprivileged school that's low on money, to try to, in a kind of a more general life skills course, to try to help these kids not become what he had. So that was something that built from a concept. So it's all about kind of thinking with what you start with and then just expanding out and hitting those different ideas. Like, what are the characters? What are the dynamics? And then you can start to build that into a comprehensive story, because it can really start from anything. It can be the smallest little inspiration. You can have the entire story idea to begin with, or you can just start with a character dynamic. It can vary so much. And another idea is like, I just said I wanted a Western. And so I expanded upon that from there. So it's really about where you want to start with and whatever feels most comfortable for you.
Gotcha. And you were talking about your story and like you said around 10,000 words right now. How much has that changed through writing those 10,000 words? Like, I kind of know a little bit about it, but can you like tell what's kind of gone through your head as you're writing it more and more, and as you go from like 1,000 to 2,000, what changes and so on and so forth?
Yeah, and that is an interesting thing. Funny you say 10, it's tens of thousands. I'm at like
tens of thousands.
I'm at 86,000 or something right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it exposes a lot of your own writing style, because it is one thing I recommend to anybody who is interested in any kind of creative writing or expression ever. Do it. Don't plan out everything. Do not take your time to have everything written out and to have every story beat, have every character dynamic written out before. Because I'm going to promise you, it's going to change as you write. Because as you go into it, no matter how great a set plan is, it's going to change as you go, because you're going to get a separate feeling for it. This story, like I said, evolved from a short story to a full novel and has changed severely. During an internship I had, I wrote a lot of the short story version of it. I wrote a ton of it. I maybe wrote like 30,000 words. I have taken and separated pretty much all of that from what I'm at now, because where I went with that changed completely from where I was at now when I started to think more about what is the meaning, what is the general plot of these characters, how do I develop these characters. That changed so much, and that happened while writing, because I wrote it and I'm like, this does not feel like it flows right. This doesn't feel like it elicits the kind of feelings I'm kind of looking for. And so as you go on, you finish one chapter, you get into 2 chapters, you finish 3 chapters. You start to think a lot more about going back. And that's why, again, another writing tip, I wish I could structure this into exact writing tips, but a writing tip I can think about right now is that when you do a first draft, there's a lot of screenwriters and writers that'll tell you about this, but it's good to just go for it and just write it and don't look back. Don't go back. Keep trying to go back and change something because you have a better idea later. Write a note of it. Keep going. Keep moving. Because if you are always going back, you're going to go there, fix that beginning, get to the same point you're at, and then you're going to want to change that again. Because I found that if I waited, like when I waited between my short story and starting up again on my, like expanding into a longer story, ideas change so much. What you initially wanted, and because it's just about your own experience, your own, you've seen more movies, you've read more books, ideas change. So that's why I say when you're working through a first draft, especially, just keep going through it and you can just skip parts. Another great thing I've recently learned, and I have tried to do this as best I can because I'm a bad person about this, is because especially if you're in a mindset of like, say more, I think that's left side of the brain where you're thinking more mathematically, analytically, you want to go step by step and hit everything. So in a scene, you think about, I want this character to go here. And I want in between, I want them to have a fight, and I want these 2 characters to talk, and I want them to have a cool horse chase. But the in-between of each of those points of when you're going from here all the way to here, these can be the hardest points, is the transition to it. These point moments where you're trying to make these work and say at this point, you're like, God, I don't know how to write this chase to be fun. Skip it. Make a note. Say you're going to come back to it and skip it. The idea with these like first draft especially is to just kind of go with the flow of it. You have a story idea, flow with it, go with it, and make notes as you go along, because as Evan said, it changes as you go, and you'll learn a lot more about the story and your own writing style and what you are trying to say as you go. You start to realize what you want out of a character, what you enjoy doing, because you're reading it, what's going to happen, but then you're writing and you're like, this is too long, this is too short, there's not enough happening here. Planning everything is very different than actually reading a novel, because that's when you start to worry about the actual lengths of stuff. So yeah, it'll change as you go. I promise you that. I have my notes on my stories are so long because I've thought of so many different things for it. But the main thing of
I can assure you.
Yeah, I've talked with Evan about these ideas and my friends about it a million times. That's why I say try your best to finish a first draft making notes before you go back and change anything. Because
have you ever like taken your story that you've written and then just erased it all and started from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I'm doing with the short story. Like I've kept some scenes. Like there's a point where he gets attacked. One of the main character gets attacked by wolves, and it's near the beginning, and it's a very intense scene. I liked how that was written, but pretty much everything after that I've removed. It's changed so much because of the direction I've wanted to go. So, and you may find that you don't even use some stuff. But it's always good to keep stuff. And another good thing to do is say it's always better when you're doing your first draft to write in excess than to not write enough. Because when you write in excess, when you do your second run around, that's when I think Neil Gaiman had a great quote about this. Your first draft is meant to be you're just putting everything out there. Your second draft is meant to look like you knew what you were doing from the start. That's when you come in and cut out everything that's unnecessary, not important. And you just see what actually matters for what you're doing. What was just fluff, unnecessary. But it's better to get everything out there first so you have a greater amount to work with. Same idea of like you're crafting something with stone. You want to start with a full block of stone and you chip away as you go. That's the idea. You're steadily chipping and chipping and chipping till you have your piece of art. You have your story. Yeah,
gotcha. Man, dude. How is it demoralizing at all when you like have to restart? Like, does that affect you at all? Like, do you feel like you've ever gotten writer's block?
Oh, writer's block, definitely. And it's such a pain sometimes because you sit there and literally every writer, anybody who's done anything creatively can say, you just sit there and stare at it. And it seems like such a struggle to put a sentence on the page because it doesn't feel right. Everything you feel like needs to change and change and change. And it can suck because some days I've made zero progress on anything. Other days I flow and I'll write for hours or an hour. No, maybe, hours, I guess. I'll just keep writing and writing because the flow will just be there. And so it varies a bit, but I always think that you shouldn't always wait for the motivation and the inspiration to hit. That's why I always say you should just try writing. And that's why I say as well if you're not good at a section, you're like, okay, I know I need to write this elevator scene next. I have no idea what these people are going to say, but you know that after that, there's going to be a big explosion and a chase or something. But you have a better feel for that. Write that. Jump to the end. Write that. I know sometimes at times you want to go from beginning to end, but really, it ends up working out a lot better if you just try to hit what did you already know you want to do and what can you hit from there and then you get those scenes and you're like, what do I want to add in there? And then you look at how do I transition to those? Because those main scenes are going to be how do I here's my theme, here's my idea, here's the main thing that happens. Because when you get caught in the details is where you start to rethink everything and it starts to be a struggle to get to the end.
That kind of makes sense. The devil's in the details kind of thing. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, because if you just spend all your time in the details and the weeds of it, it's so hard to make any progress because you worry about every little thing. And that's why I say, some people make a lot more of a structure. There are definitely different writing styles because some people definitely make more of a structure. I tend to do a little bit more of a structure, get a general plot outline before I go. But I also know I'm not really going to stick with that. I know things are going to change as I go, start to get a feel for it.
I'm sorry. I
fine.
forgot I have TA things. I will just mute this and then I'll be right back.
No worries. I'll keep talking. But yeah, it just depends on your kind of writing style. And when it comes to writing in general, I've talked more about creatively thinking in terms of getting your ideas into stories. But writing in general, it's so hard to explain with it because like creative writing is knowing when to, they give the description of show don't tell. I find it, a lot of people struggle with writing because it's so staunchly different than what you can do with storytelling in a movie setting. You have a movie, you have a visual, you have your eyes to tell you something more so than a character talking. You have different senses. When you're working with a book, you're only working with words. So when you are only working with words, over detailing and under detailing both become an issue. It becomes finding that centerpiece. And I found that one of the important things that somebody wrote that I've heard multiple times is when you're describing, say, a character or a place, focus on important details. So when I introduce a new character, I'm not trying to say he is 6'3", he has olive skin, He has short, scruffy hair. He has a soul patch. Don't know whoever was wearing a soul patch. He's wearing like raggedy jeans, kind of gray colored. He's got a white T-shirt. You can see the shirt is kind of torn there. Describing everything, it becomes a laundry list, and it's kind of hard for your person to read. And that becomes the same with location. You're spending all your time just detailing every single detail of it. So I say, care more about what is important. What is the detail that's going to tell you what you need to know about this character? So when I say this guy comes up, I describe more so his ratty attire in general, his mean look, his like standoffish kind of, rough exterior. That gives you an idea of what this character is like. Same thing with, say you introduce a new location and you want to say it's the grandeur of, say, an elven city. Give more generals, be like, it's the beautiful arcs, the glowing gold color, everything is so, well flowing and everything, and so imbued with nature. Excess detail can only go so far, because at some point it's like, this is a burden to read. So think more about what is the essential parts in what you're telling. And that's always comes with taking everything you're talking about and condensing it into the essential parts. And that just comes into writing in general. The general, writing tips about, all that of like, should I say said or exclaimed, using all those exact ones. That also becomes a bit of a feel for it. It becomes what kind of words can evoke vivid imagery. I like to always think that when I'm describing something, I'm saying what can bring to mind the most, strongest imagery. And then as well, when you're describing feelings and emotions, it is a lot of the show don't tell thing applies a lot to it. I know people throw that line out there a million times, but the show don't tell when it comes to writing is a lot, again, telling the important details and not always just saying somebody is mad. Use visualization to tell, because it's the same thing as if you're in a movie. I'm not gonna if I yelled at Evan in a movie and he just was like, you could tell he's sad, and I'm not gonna be like, are you sad? It's not good writing. It's pretty bad. But so in a story, something like that, I'm saying, Max yelled with such anger at Evan. How dare you do this? And Evan averted his eyes, sunk his lips drooped a little bit. Details that evoke imagery that tell you what you need to know. That is kind of the essential of it. And as well, you have to think the difference between when you're just wanting to write for a visual medium, say if you're writing for screenwriting, where that kind of cues are a little bit more important, where there were those, you think there's going to be actors doing this, they can kind of tell this kind of stuff. When it comes to a book, your words are all that's going into the person's head. So at that point, you're describing this stuff, and as well, you're talking about some emotions in that, what they're feeling. So the show don't tell rule is a little bit hard to follow, for sure. But it is always about taking important details of everything. And that's always the idea of like throwing everything out there and then cutting it down to the essentials. All good, Evan?
I completely forgot I was doing my TA office hours right now. For those that don't know, I'm a graduate student, so this is like my job. And yeah, I didn't think that anyone would be coming to my office hours on the first week of classes, but there's a first for anything. So I kind of missed all that you talked about, so I'm guessing that he did an excellent job.
I was talking about the show don't tell rule, about trying to describe. I was talking about more about the writing thing, because I was saying it's kind of hard to just talk about how to write, and it's more so talking about how would you construct your writing in the correct way. Of like, the show don't tell about describing characters, about explaining emotions, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So you're saying instead of saying like the character is sad, like giving expressions to show that they're sad, kind of like in a subtle way rather than just like bam.
Yeah, visualization.
Okay, gotcha. Because that'll definitely help with that creative process of like picturing your characters and then like bringing them to life within your own mind, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and then like I said, trying to give calling upon the senses. That's the best way when you're working with just a medium that is written word. You need to be able to call upon other senses to create a better idea in your mind of what the story is. More visual descriptions can give you a better idea of it, as opposed to saying the guy was tall. the guy, you could say the guy, the guy's head stood above the clouds, over the highest pine
then
tree.
that definitely like is more intriguing to hear rather than just, oh yeah, he's 6'6". It's like, no, he towers over the tallest aisle in Walmart, like something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, and using those kind of descriptors to kind of like overemphasize and give weight to all that's going on, create interest. And that just becomes a bit of like looking at grammar, which I know is a bit of a pain, but looking into that's always going to help you a little bit for being able to create like metaphors and similes and that create better ideas of
grammar,
that kind of stuff.
Grammar is a piece of work sometimes.
Oh gosh. And from my perspective as someone who likes to write, I hate grammar. It's a pain. I don't even know all of the rules. I really don't. I just care more about, as I'm reading this, is it interesting? Is it fun to read? Like with what I'm comparing to and that. Because at a point you're going to read it as when you say, Joe went here, Joe picked up rock, Joe threw rock into pond, Joe was happy.
Kill wife.
There's nothing exciting about reading that. But when you add emphasis to it, it's like Joe sauntered over to the rock, examining everything for the perfect shape. He gripped in his hand, felt the cool touch along his calloused hands. Yeah. Stuff like that gives you an idea of the scene. It gives you a visualization of what is happening.
I really don't think I've ever read a book and then been like, oh, let's look for grammatical errors. Oh man, is this a right sentence? Is this a run-on? Like I don't think anyone ever picks up a book and does that. And if they do, it's kind of hypocritical of people. Yeah,
though I have noticed when people spell words wrong in books. I've noticed that.
I notice misspellings if I know the word that is.
That's about it. Yeah.
But I'm not gonna like email the publisher or whoever wrote it and be like, hey, you wrote this word wrong. I'm not gonna be that hypercritical.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wait, speaking of that, would you like, if you I'm gonna say when you publish a book, if you had a grammatical error or like a spelling error and then someone told you that, would you like care? Also answer this question. I have another student. I'll be right back.
I would cry all night long. I would not be able to live with myself. Nah, I think honestly, I wish I knew more about the publishing process, but typically they have like people kind of look through that. I think you need to get an editor though. Yeah, I don't know. I would probably, I wouldn't really be worried too much. I'd be like, okay, it's just, you got the idea of what I was saying. But another interesting thing to talk about when it comes to when we're talking about writing, well, Evan's off like this, I was going to talk about when it comes to creating characters. So again, referring to Save the Cat is a great way, and the part they talk about is specifically with writing characters. And I think it was very interesting to hear that because she talked about thinking of 3 things: strengths, weaknesses, flaws, goals. I think those 3 things are kind of the main ways you're going to create a character of like, what are they good at? What is their flaw in their character or person? And what are they trying to achieve? As well as what they would, what does that mean to them? Those are kind of the essential aspects of a character. So when you have somebody and you looking at them, if you can't say what all 3 of those are, then that may not be as developed as a character as you want to be, as you want to create. So that was the same with me when I wrote the bingo story, the horror story. When I first looked at it, I thought, man, this guy doesn't really have a character. He's not really a person. He's just a scared guy. And so I thought more about, what is he trying to achieve? What does he want in life? What does he like to do? What are his strengths? And then I say, what is causing him to fail? What are his flaws? Is playing into his character arc that he has to overcome? Because character arcs are all about overcoming flaws. Either overcoming or succumbing to them. That's what they're about. So I started to think more about that, and that gave me a better idea of what I wanted out of this character. And therefore, it could go more into what is the meaning of the story. It starts to be that you kind of see how things can connect together as you expand out these a little bit more. Because at first, you have a cohesive world where it's very simple. You expand it out, and you maybe have some things that are more tangential. You have a villain that you want to be like this. You have a hero that you want to be like this. And it starts to be like, I don't know how these are going to fit. But as you start to develop that, think more about how it can work. And you start to think in how they fit into a main idea, a main world, a main plot, a main theme. They can start to connect together a little bit. You start to see how these characters work with each other, how they tie to this plot, how they expand it further. So that's always a good way to think about your characters when you're doing it. And it means the same thing with like setting or theme, expanding that out to think about how do they relate to what we're dealing with. In the case of the story, the horror story, I thought just being about a horror story, but then I thought being about, with a kid's show that's possibly evil and people being obsessed with it, I thought about, that's probably an issue. We could talk about like toxicity in media. And then from there, I'm like, what can I do to further grow on that theme? And how can these characters work with that? And then you start to be like, oh, I see where this arc is going to go. I see how this character can succumb to his faults. I can see how certain parts of them are going to conflict more with the story. You start to see how those ideas can work together. And that's why you could build from any direction. It's kind of just a circle, like a big circular shape. You can approach from any side really and work inwards towards that center, that final piece. It's just about wherever you start, wherever you feel comfortable from. But at some point, in order to find that center, you can imagine it's a very complicated maze. You're going to cover about all the area before you end up at the center. So it's just about, how you get there. And as well, while Evan's talking about it, I'll say that a good way to also say you want to, create a good writing schedule. So to move on to a little bit different topic, to work on, say, a better writing schedule per se, to write more often, just get better at it. I find that, trying to set down times that you can do it consistently. I found that it's better to say, I'm going to write so many pages in a week, as opposed to saying I'm going to write for 30 minutes a day. Just try to be consistent in your efforts to write. Evan's all good now. Evan, I'm just talking about now. I was talking more about the whole character, like creating good characters in that, and now I'm talking about just like creating good habits of writing. Yeah.
Like
so,
time management, or just like getting into that flow of writing. Like, can you write like an hour a day and then still like get a book out?
Yeah, totally. It's just about your flow, because you can look at someone like Stephen King and he writes 6 pages a day. That's his like goal. That's what he hits. And so he can get a book done in, a few months. Totally. That's just about his work schedule. But, look at George R.R. Martin. He takes a few years to write a book at times. Sometimes it's shorter, but it's just about how your style is. I found this one thing, and this has become, and I recommend to anyone who watches and is interested in this, listen to podcasts, go on Instagram or any Reddit or any of that stuff, watch YouTube videos about writing, especially podcasts. There's a great, if you guys recommended, I'll say Gel Apocalypse is a YouTuber. He makes some great content, a lot of voice acting stuff, but he has a great podcast talking about just voice acting, but he also talks a lot about creative thinking and creative writing, and he has some great ideas about that and talks about some interesting points. I recommend listening to him. But in listening to him and some other people, I found a great point of like, it's better to just try to say, I'm going to write something every day, as opposed to saying I'm going to hit so many pages every day. Because you may not hit the same amount every day, but if you're constantly working on it and thinking on it, you're amazed about the flow and how you start to think more about your story, and then you start to get ideas outside of writing that you then like, oh, I'm ready to go once I sit in front of my computer. It's better. I found, and again, it may be different for other people. It depends on what you want to do. But I found that just consistency, and it's the same with like lifting. Consistency is the best way to do it, as opposed to just hitting it really hard for certain times. Just be consistent with it. Because that's just going to keep that.
Consistency is key with everything, man. Not just lifting and climbing. It's everything. Like getting up in the morning, and consistency is key. If you always get up at 7 a.m., you're going to get up at 7 a.m. without an alarm.
Yeah. It's amazing what it can do for you. And so same as that kind of like it gets your body in a routine. It gets your mind in a routine. You start to think more about your story. You start to think more about what I'm trying to do. It keeps it in your head and allows you to, maybe one day you don't flow as well. You start to flow outside of writing. It starts to become in your mind, and you start to get things. I found the best way I get ideas and notes on my stories is always when I worked consistently on it. That is when I found to be the best. But as well as with consistent writing, sometimes you just want consistent, some just practice of just maybe not on your story. Because at some point, every person who writes or works on a creative endeavor, they want to start on something else halfway through. There's always something they're like, ooh, that sounds more interesting. I want to go into that. So I always recommend of like, say, maybe have 2 things working at the same time, or have something like this. So this is another resource I recommend. Barnes & Noble has a ton of books like these. this is just when I have 712 more things to write about. Books like these are great. And you can, I mean, honestly, you could follow Instagram pages that post the same shit every day. But the idea is that, they just give you, like, you can't really read them because it's hard to tell, but they give you just like, it's impossible to read that. But basically they give you just every page. It's 712 different topics, and it's different lengths and different things, but they prompt you to think and have all these different prompts and just to write. You could join like a writing club and do stuff like that as well. But if you just want to work on your own, books like these are a great way to do it, of just that practice. And so maybe you don't write your book every day, but practicing writing every day, just the same as lifting every day. It trains your mind as well as something like lifting would train your body. So I recommend a resource like this as well if you want to try something. And not to mention, a lot of these can come with ideas for other stories, because it's amazing where inspiration can come from. It can come from just anything. It's weird because they think it's like you watch some movie or you see some beautiful thing, you're like, that's what I want to write about. I could be as stupid as you just like look at a can and like, I got it.
You go to the store and then get some fingerling potatoes and you're like, I want to write a story about these.
Yeah, that's how they wrote that. Was that Don't Look Up? What was the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio where Timothy Chalamet said, I fucking love fingerling potatoes. Yeah, it's amazing what can like be inspiration for you. And that's also why I recommend, having something you can write notes on. Just throw ideas out on there, because I found so many things have just been like come out of my mind. Just write it down. Just put down those ideas, because some things just come to your mind and it's always the idea of like it's like with the draft, it's throwing some stuff there so that at some point you just come back and you can like focus that.
Yeah, and living in the digital age, it's so easy to take notes. You can just write them on your phone and then they're accessible anywhere.
Yeah, or just sketch them into the side of a cave, either whatever way you want to do it, or scroll. Yeah. I imagine just scroll like write it with chalk on your walls like you're a madman. Whichever way works.
That's what I'll do over there, so I have some graphics up there.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, it slipped my mind for a second, but yeah, just it's weird where you're gonna find inspiration, and then as well, taking notes about whatever you think of, and as well as like thinking about possibly looking at other methods of working on. So I'm gonna just show another example. I think we're doing okay on time, but for me, it's helped. So this is like for my horror story. As I said, it's about a children's show. So these are like the children's mascot characters. I found drawing has been a great way of me to visualize and get ideas for my story. So like I said, sometimes just drawing and stuff like this can be ways of thinking better ideas and thinking more about, I know how this scene's going to be because I've wrote and drawn some with it. It's just interesting where it can come from, but it always just comes down to something, just about consistency and what you're trying to do.
Where did you get the ideas for those specific characters? Did those just pop it up into your head when you were listening to that one podcast?
Oh, for the ones that in my drawings, that came from a mix of stuff. So like when I thought of wanted to be about a children's show, and the main horror is these like weird like children's mascot characters, kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, or that was one way. And then another thing was Chuck E. Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese had old animatronics that looked really weird. Oh gosh, dude. Creepy.
Even the Chuck E. Cheese mascot things that people used to wear, creepy. Oh.
They're real weird. And so that helped to just design some stuff. And honestly, I just used just some pictures online of like mascot costumes of different animals. And I just made it like, what can I make it weird and disturbing? Or other just animals in general. Just kind of took that and then just drew a little bit from there to get those ideas. So yeah, it just that was just something of like just doing a bit of research on it and just getting some ideas for that to kind of help visualize some stuff. But some people don't need as much visuals for it. Yeah. They can just put it all in the words. It's kind of just about how it works for you. But I found that has been a great way of like being able to because sometimes you have all these ideas in your head, because writing is always about just taking the ideas in your head and putting into something that's easy for somebody to understand. So I found that sometimes drawing stuff is a good way to think about like all these visuals in my head that I don't know quite how to put into words, just to put it there so I can see it.
Gotcha. So, yeah. And then like when you're writing and drawing more so, and you come up with these characters, like, is it hard to put drawings that you made into the book? Like, I know commissioning people is a thing, so you can commission someone to make your art, but like, how hard / easy is it to like get those integrated into a book?
I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're, because like some people commission to like actually have like cover art and stuff. But I've heard, because I went to a talk by an author one time, and he said he actually commissioned some people to draw his characters, and that helped giving him a better idea of what he wanted the characters to look like. Because sometimes it's like, okay, here's my description of the character. I want you to draw it, and I want to see your creation of it. And so that kind of helped them get a visual of like what is important about this character. What were essential details? Kind of I talked about those important details. What did they get from your description that could allow them to draw it? And so that kind of helps with how working on mine. So like with these, it helps because, these are kind of like these appear in the story. And so I just kind of had them work in of like, I knew that they were going to be these mascot characters, and I just didn't know what they wanted to look like. And so doing this has helped me get a visual of how to describe them. And when drawing, especially, is like, what is the most disturbing aspect of these? So like when we're looking at the owl face here, it's talking about how the eyes are just so sunken in and black. That helps me to figure out how do I want to describe it. What is the main thing that's creepy about it? And then say the bunny here with its like splattered paint, the eye hanging loose. That is like the main things that are scary about it. Something like this, the whale, kind of its weird eyes that are apart, and it's kind of creepy smile, those kind of things. And then we look at actual bingo here, and just get some ideas of like when I draw these, what are the main parts about it that make it scary? What emotions is it trying to elicit, and is that in line with what I want it to do? So that gives you a good help of like, are you describing it in a way that, so when you draw like this, you're thinking main important aspects of it, those are going to go into my writing to elicit the correct emotions without going overboard and making people like, I'm taking forever to read this description.
Gotcha. It's a fine balance, I feel. I haven't written anything, so I don't really know how to, but it sounds like you have definitely done this plenty of times. With bingo, like designing your characters, because you designed them all by yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I drew upon, like I said, drawings and other stuff, but I drew those by hand myself, yeah.
Gotcha. How many like different bingos have you gone through before you got with that one?
Funny enough, that was my initial idea. I drew that one initially, so that may change. And so that was like my initial. I went through a couple different ideas because I wanted a dog-like character, and so I went through a couple of different dog mascots, and I found that the Chuck E. Cheese one was kind of like similar to the Chuck E. Cheese style was kind of how I wanted it to look. So I just kind of drew upon that. That's why it's kind of the thing of like. I also say as well, don't worry about being original, because nothing is original. Every story, if you look at it, is taken from some inspiration. As original as a concept can seem, there's probably something that's done it before. So don't feel bad. Don't steal from people, of course, but don't feel bad of taking, like, I took inspiration from this person to do this. I took this, I really liked how they did this, and I wanted to do that kind of character. I wanted to include that design. Don't be afraid of that kind of stuff. And don't feel like you are a bad writer for doing that. People to get inspiration from all kinds of places. So, taking those kind of things and using that in your own style, that is what matters more so. And that's why I think don't always get caught up in being too similar. Like one of my story ideas for the Western story I was talking about, I wanted it to be I watched Hateful Eight, which is a Quentin Tarantino movie, and I wanted to make a story that's a Western about people stuck in a mansion and they're trying to figure out who a killer is. It's very, very, it's basically the plot of the movie, but I took it and I'm like, okay, I really like that style. What can I change and make it more of my own that I like? And so for me, I was starting to add in stories about like the Wendigo and Native American folklore into it, and creating like this weird kind of like supernatural thing with these kind of stories, as well as diving into like Native American, history and culture, and that is where I started to differentiate from that. But it was based on that story. It was based on a movie, an existing story. So it's, stories can inspire a lot of different stories, but I always just think about like, when you look at it, be like, what about this story do I find interesting? And what do I want to do with it to make it my own? Because trust me, if somebody made a sequel to my book in their own style, I don't care. Go for it. I would love to see how you think about this, because it's all different creative ideas. Everybody's mind is so different in what they think of. You can go it's amazing what everybody can do. And I think anybody can have a interesting creative mind. if they just like learn how to express it. So I would say don't always worry about I'm not original or this isn't as cool as somebody else's idea. There's probably something really cool in it. You just see it as yourself, so you see it as boring. Don't be afraid to express the ideas you have, because I guarantee those ideas can be interesting. Something about maybe not the entire thing, maybe not every single part of it, but there's something in it that can be interesting.
Gotcha. It's kind of definitely helped me like think more about this. Like it sounds intriguing to like start writing one of these things, and like the fact that it doesn't take much time a day. Like you could get away with like probably writing 6 pages a day like some successful authors. It's just crazy to see like actually how, I don't want to say little work because there's probably a lot going on in the background, but like how at face value, how like small proportions there are a day that you can hammer away at to get a book out, like to be published. It
can be intimidating to look at and think about I have to write an entire book, but you just go a piece at a time. Write what you at a time. You're like, what do I feel like writing about this time? What kind of scene do I want to talk about more right now? And then it kind of just builds off from there as you put together these little parts. And imagine it's just a big puzzle. You don't go, you just kind of get pieces and you mix it together and you connect until you have a full picture.
You do the edge first, and then you start working on the message.
I mean, that's kind of like the structure of the story. So you do kind of do the edge first. Some insane people start from the middle. I don't know.
I don't think I've ever met anyone, nor do I ever want to meet anyone
that's a dangerous person.
On a puzzle from the inside out.
That's a scary person.
First thing you look for when you're making a puzzle is the corner pieces, the edge pieces, like, because then you can build out from that.
Yeah, and you can think about that as your initial idea of like, my corner piece right here, that's my main character. My corner piece here, that's my setting. Corner piece here, that's my theme.
And then you can start to connect them. Like your character connects to your theme like this, so on and so forth. And then you can connect your theme to this point down here by the jumbled mess in the middle. Dang, and then you start to writing a book is like a fucking puzzle.
It is. It really is, because then you start to think about how do I connect these pieces that are so apart and so weirdly shaped, and you have to think about scenes and words and dialogue and all this. It's hard. It's hard. And I feel like another one we may go more into actual writing, like words and how to format paragraphs and all that. We may go into that at another time. This one I wanted to talk more about general creative endeavors.
Yeah. Dude, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. That is wild. What a comparison.
Yeah, it's funny enough.
I always sat here thinking like, dude, creative writing has got to be ass. Like I couldn't do it. I still don't know if I could. I'm very scientific with my thoughts. And like it's like building a puzzle. Like it boils down to that.
Yeah. And I think also, and it's also thinking about, don't care so much about what is popular and what you think everybody else is going to like. It's a weird thing of just write about what you like and write about, because I guarantee there's going to be somebody else who likes it. And again, when you write about what you're writing about, you're writing and expressing yourself creatively, and then there's going to have worth and value in that from somebody else's perspective. Because trust me, you're not going to have any motivation to keep going when you're writing about something you don't give a damn about. So I always say, like, when you have an idea, just I just say to go for it. And it is a thing of like, everybody's doing it, and you think everybody has ideas, everybody's doing it, there's a million books. There's no one who's written a book from your mindset.
Yeah,
you are unique. You have, and everybody, to say the whole thing, to say everyone, snowflakes and all that. People, I think they're unique in their mindset, because so many people have grown up in different ways and are exposed to different things. Yeah. Even Evan and I, who have grown up and lived in the same place, went to the same classes, did a lot of the same stuff together. We're very different people, and we have very different mindsets and ideas and different forms of creativity and all that. It's amazing how much that can change. And so I always say, like, if you're interested in wanting to do this stuff, I just say go for it. Because like for me, when I first started, I wasn't trying to find everything and research everything so I knew exactly how to write creatively. I just started writing scenes out and writing and trying to visualize them for myself. And as you go, you start to feel like, oh, this is how you start. This is how you write it in an interesting way. Like, how does this sound better? And that's when you start looking at other people's writing. You start looking at more other creative works. And that's how you kind of build upon yourself. But it always starts from just doing. It's hard. That's why I say it's hard to teach how to write creatively, because you can teach how to write academically and how to write a strong supporting argument and that kind of stuff. And, there are English classes that talk about that, but they don't talk about how to write as a creative person. They don't teach you they don't always teach you how to write a book. They teach you how to write a literary analysis. So that's why I say, when it comes to that kind of stuff, of just writing and looking at what was interesting in books and other forms of media that made it interesting to read these words.
And I mean, when you write it, I just thought about one of my friends back from undergrad. He was writing like, it's not even like a book. It was just random thoughts that he had during the day. So like one of them was to take all of the vapes, like those vape pens from the frats, put them up to a giant fan and then set it to blow into the like fraternity house. So that way it would be labeled a chemical hazard by like, the CDC or something, because of how much vape was in there. And then he just wrote about a bunch of different things that he thought about while he was just walking on campus. Like he talked about throwing an egg at someone's car while they're in it and then watching their reaction. And like, if you want to do that, like go write about stuff like that. And then just like, if you find an idea from like vaping out the frat house, write a book about it, I guess.
Write a book, a short story, whatever you want to do with it. We thought, whatever random thoughts can, you don't imagine how many things. When you start paying attention and thinking about that kind of stuff, you start to think about, you find that kind of ideas just everywhere. It's weird.
Yeah.
So, I think
we're giving us information about all this creative thing. I don't even know how long this has been going on. I didn't start a timer or anything.
Yeah. I feel like we're pretty good. When do you think we started? Like a little after 4?
I think we're about at an hour right now.
That's pretty good then. That's about what we aim for. So
yeah.
And I've talked a lot. Well, I think it also helped that there's times where you were just you had to do your thing. So
I was gone.
You just had to step out. So I'm like, okay, I'll just steal some stuff out.
Same guy joined twice, so I helped him out twice, and I haven't seen him since. And I told him I'll see you again in 5 minutes, and it's been like 15. I don't think I'm seeing him again. But yeah, it has been a pleasure, and I wish I could have heard all of it instead of tutoring for a little bit, but
Yeah, no, I was like talking about it, because some of this stuff is just stuff I've learned, and I just kind of like sharing it, because I just like to think, I like to think from this, and this kind of goes with the point of what we're doing, of this is stuff for me that I learned that helped me get going as a beginner. So a lot of this stuff kind of was like stuff that helped me really just be able to get started. I don't have a book. I don't have awards or anything like that, but it's what helps me be able to make progress on these ideas. So what I hope you got out of this is just some ideas and some inspiration and stuff and give you ideas where to go to start helping move forward and to start maybe acting upon these ideas you have. We can't say I tell you exactly how to do everything with writing. You can definitely watch a Neil Gaiman talk, Gaiman, I don't know how to say his name. He trust me, he knows a lot more about writing than I do, but I want to give a perspective of, he didn't start, he's not a amateur, he's a professional. He's been doing it for years. I want to take this from the perspective of somebody who has started recently and what has worked for him, what has helped him. So, yeah. And I hope to somebody out there, this has helped you get a better idea to think creatively. I would love, if this has helped to give you ideas to start, working on your own stuff and start to maybe just think more about, maybe I could, work on, make something out of this. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I feel like we should touch at this at the beginning of the video, but you can always watch our podcast at our YouTube. Are we making a new channel, or are we just staying with LOL and RF? I think we're just going to stick with LOL and RF for now. Okay, well, you can watch us at youtube.com and then search up LOL and RF, and you'll
probably get a lot of videos about pulling refs. So just be sure to click that button that says, "Are you sure you meant this?" And you press, "Yeah, I meant to search up pulling the ref." And then you'll see us up there.
Yep, we're not quite known enough that you're gonna find it as easily. So look for that.
And then hopefully we'll eventually be on Spotify once we figure out how to get published on Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We try to get on a bunch of stuff, whatever podcast platforms we can. So
and you can listen to us on your podcast platform of choice.
Yeah, there you go. And if you have any suggestions for other stuff to talk about, we have a couple ideas in mind for stuff. We also are possibly talking about bringing some people on, which will be kind of fun. It'll be fun having some other, experiences and some other perspectives on different topics. But if you guys have some stuff you want us to talk about, or just talk about some stuff more, feel free to let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again next time.
Have a good one. Cowboy Bebop.